And many left him because what he said was impossible to believe. Today, we're finishing up the 6th chapter of John's Gospel. And let me give you a little bit of a synopsis of what we've been going through over these last weeks. We've done a lot of preaching on this 6th chapter, which has to do with the Eucharist. And this is what the disciples found hard to believe and why many left him. As I told you in the past, in John's Gospel, there is no scene for the institution of the Eucharist. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have scenes, Last Supper scenes, where Jesus is instituting the Eucharist. You don't find it here in this Gospel. This 6th chapter substitutes for the institution of the Eucharist in the other Gospels. Now, why is this so? Well, probably because John presumes that everyone knew about the institution of the Eucharist. Why? This is the last Gospel written. It's written in the year 90. So we have, Mark around 65, 70, Luke around 70, and Matthew around 85. And by this time, the church is maturing in its beliefs and wants to make sure that people do understand about the truth of the Holy Eucharist. So we have this 6th chapter, which substitutes for those institution narratives of the other Gospels. And Jesus says, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you do not have life within you. Now, those hearing him, many of them found this repulsive for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're going to eat your body and drink your blood, and that will give us life. You've got to be kidding. You've got to be kidding. This is what is going to save us? And then how can we eat your body and drink your blood? How can we do such a thing? And thirdly, it was also somewhat repulsive to the Jewish people. Why? Because kosher law said you're not supposed to eat the blood. And, so even to this day, you have a certain group, we know them as Jehovah's Witnesses. They won't take a blood transfusion because in the Old Testament it says, you shall not take the blood of an animal. And if you're familiar with kosher law, of course, the kosher law dictates the way an animal is to be slaughtered, and it must be drained of its blood. So the Jews and those disciples who had been with Jesus for a time period, when they hear this, they say, that's it. No more. We're gone. Okay. Now, let me give you, I'll give you some stories about the Eucharist and how they can teach us about exactly what the Eucharist is. And then at the end of these stories, I'm going to quote to you from a great theologian. I might even give you a chance to raise your hand and guess who it is. How's that? Okay, let's take a look at the stories. Okay, first story is this. Many years ago, I lived down the Jersey Shore. How many here have ever gone to Wildwood, New Jersey? What a place, huh? What a place. You walk that boardwalk, and there are all kinds of amusements there. There are rides, there are games, there's all kinds of food there. And just a marvelous place to spend a vacation. As a matter of fact, in those days, I was able to jog and even run. And I used to run on the boards. It was a wonderful experience. The sea breeze and if you ran at 9 o'clock in the morning, Kate Smith sang "God Bless America," and I felt like Rocky. But anyway, way at the end of the boardwalk, right as you end the boardwalk, and you're almost in North Wildwood, there was a little chapel, and it was set up by I'd say it was a fundamentalist church. And every night they would have a prayer service, and they would have a presentation as to what they believed. And we're trying to proselytize, get people to join their church. And I was walking on the boardwalk with a friend of mine. He's a priest from Philadelphia. Now, let me tell you something about those Philly guys. They're like little firecrackers, okay? And he's a small guy, but he had a very good intellect, and he had a hot temper. So he's listening, or they're listening to these preachers, and they're putting down the Catholic Church because they said the Catholic Church is not biblically based. Uh-oh. Little Charlie goes ballistic. He jumps on the platform that they had. He grabbed the microphone and he says, "How about this? This is my body, this is my blood. That's biblical. That's exactly what the Bible says, and you don't believe that." I said, "Let's get out of here. I think they're going to beat me up too." I grabbed them, but they were like stunned. They're like, you know why? He hit a nerve. This is my body, this is my blood. What more do you need? That's scriptural. So, the Eucharist is scriptural, number one. Okay. Number two story, again, when you get my age, everything is many years ago. Many years ago. I was the supply chaplain at the United States Coast Guard base in Cape May, New Jersey. And that's the boot camp for the Coast Guard. And at that time, this was in the early 80s, President Reagan was building up the military. I get a call, it's a little bit of a longer story, but I won't tell you the whole story. I get a phone call from the chaplain, Navy chaplain. See, Navy supplies Coast Guard and Marines. And he said to me, "Look," he says, "we're overwhelmed here with all of these recruits, and we need some help in counseling them and also in saying Mass on Sundays for them." He said, "Could you help us out?" And I said, "I'd be delighted to. Anything for Uncle Sam and Ronald Reagan. Whatever he wants. I didn't know it was a paid position. I really didn't. I was doing it because I wanted to be very patriotic. When October came, I get this brown envelope, and it says Department of the Treasury. Of course, Coast Guard was on the Treasury at that time. And it's like about $4,000 check, but I didn't know it was a check. I thought the IRS told me that I owed them $4,000. And I said, "Oh no, I didn't even make $4,000. I'm going to pay $4,000. So I showed it to a friend of mine. I said, "Look, I got this thing from the Treasury Department." He says, "That's a check for your services at the Coast Guard base." So it worked out good. It really worked out good. But anyway, God takes care of you. When you do something good, God's going to take care of you. He's going to give you back in abundance. I've found that to be true so many times. Okay. So anyway, we had masses, and we had a Protestant chaplain there too. And, when, kids are in boot camp, they get religion right away. You'd be surprised. All they need is their, we used to call it the CC, their commanding officer or their sergeant or whatever the case may be, because they're getting yelled at all the time, and they're scared, they're away from home, and it's a new environment, there's new people, and they start going to church. They go to every church service there is, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, they all came, and Jewish came too. We had a rabbi too. Okay. So anyway, one day I'm getting ready to say Mass, and the Catholic recruits are coming in, and they are genuflecting before the tabernacle. And there was this man in the front row, and big black man. And I found out he was from a place called Harlem, New York. We've heard of Harlem. Well, Harlem is getting to be quite the place to live these days. I hope he held on to his property. He says, "Pastor, I want to ask you something. He says, how come you Catholics keep dropping on your knees every time you pass by that altar? I said, well, Theodos, his name was Theodos. I said, well, Theodos, I said, that's because we believe, you see that box there? He goes, yeah. I said, we believe that we have bread in there. And because the priest said the words, this is my body, this is my blood, that becomes the body and blood of Christ. And so it's a sign of respect for Jesus in the Eucharist. And Theodos says to me, Pastor, if I could believe that, I'd crawl up that aisle. Eucharist is a matter of faith. It's a matter of faith. God gives us that faith, that this is really the body and blood of Christ. It looks the same. Some of you may have studied Thomas Aquinas. Remember the accidents, how it looks and how it tastes and how it feels. Those are accidents. They stay the same. But the substance changes. It's no longer simply bread and wine. It is now the body and blood of Christ. If I could believe that, Pastor, I'd crawl up that aisle. I think of him quite often. I think maybe he thinks about that quite often. Yeah, maybe he even became a Catholic. I don't know. So say a prayer for Theodos wherever he is. Okay. Last story. You may have recalled, but again, as I said, we get to my age, we kind of go back in time. But I think many of you are around my age. We're around 39, 40 years old here. But Pope John Paul II, this great pope, he was visiting the United States, and he paid a visit to Washington. And while in Washington, he decided that he was also going to pay a visit to the cathedral in Baltimore. That's the primatial see. That's the first see in the United States. And you could imagine when a pope is going to go someplace, they have to have very, very tight security, very tight security. And so they would send in a team way before the pope was ever going to arrive at a place, in this case, at the cathedral. They'd send in a team the day before, and they'd begin to do what they call a sweep, okay? They scout out the place. Because why? Well, you want to make sure there are no bombs in there. You want to make sure that there are nobody is going to shoot the Pope. There's no shooter in there. You got to be careful because you don't want a tragedy to take place. Anyway, they also bring in dogs. And they have these dogs, and dogs are pretty smart. They're very smart. I think a lot of you know, if you're reading about what dogs can do, they can detect when somebody's blood sugar is going low. Imagine that. You get a dog, and the dog knows that, hey, your blood sugar is getting low, you better get some help. I think I better get one of those dogs, okay? They could also detect cancer. They tell us that dogs can detect cancer. They sniff around, lick around, and they know something's going on. So they're pretty smart. Well, in this case, they let the dogs loose, and the agents are all over the place, and all of a sudden they hear, oh, do you want to howl? Oh, okay. Oh, dear. I'll tell you a story about howling some other time. So they go running, the agents go running, and they say, there's somebody in here. There's somebody in here. And they go running, and there's the dogs surrounding the tabernacle howling. They knew somebody was in there. And that's a true story. You can look it up online. To this very day, the agents are saying the dogs knew something that a lot of us didn't know. Okay? The Eucharist is real. It's biblical. It's a gift of faith. And it's real. Okay. Now, in summation, I am going to quote to you something from a great theologian. Do you know today, a lot of people have complaints about the Catholic Church. They say things like this: I don't like that priest. I don't like his sermons. I don't like the music. Not you, Mr. Ty. They love you to death, okay? And this theologian said to me, I don't care about the priest. I don't care who he is. I don't care about the homily. I don't care about the music. All I care about is the Eucharist, and that's why I go to church. It's the real thing. It's Jesus. Who said that? Anybody know? All right, take a guess. Great theologian. My sister Marie. God love you.
Another special day here today. It's Father Rossi's birthday.
I'm getting too old for this. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. It's very, very kind of all of you. And may God bless you all.